She kissed me goodnight, then went back to the kitchen to finish the poison. It was supposed to be just another Thursday night in Austin, Texas. Rain tapping against the windows, the distant hum of cicadas, the scent of her vanilla candles wafting from the living room. I'd just taken my last sip of wine when the first wave of dizziness hit. Mild at first, then blinding. My vision blurred. My limbs felt like lead. I remember her leaning over me, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead with a look so tender. Too tender. That was the moment I knew. She wanted me dead. Welcome to Karma Strikes, where betrayal meets justice. In this episode, you're about to witness a story so chilling, so carefully orchestrated, it will make you question, how well do you really know the person sleeping next to you? Her name is Rachel, 34, occupational therapist, the kind of woman everyone trusts. The one who bakes extra cookies for the neighbors, organizes food drives at church, never raises her voice. To the world, she was an angel. To me, she was my wife, my partner of 10 years, my ride or die, until I uncovered her plan. A plan so intricate it involved fake invoices, tampered brakes, and a secret life insurance policy worth $700,000, with my name printed across the top. But here's the twist. I didn't die. I played along. I smiled. I acted as if I never noticed the suspicious grocery receipts, the deleted texts to an unknown number, or the eerie internet history full of searches like, "How long does antifreeze stay in the body?" and "Murder without evidence." I let her believe she was winning, because while she was planning my funeral, I was quietly planning her public execution, figuratively speaking. In the next 55 minutes, you'll witness a husband pushed to the edge and a wife who underestimated the quiet man she thought she could erase. You'll see how far someone will go when love turns into survival and revenge becomes justice. By the end, only one question remains. If you were in his shoes, would you forgive or destroy? Stay with us. The truth gets uglier from here. His name is Daniel Carter, 40 years old, born and raised in Flagstaff, Arizona. A software engineer turned small business owner, Dan ran a modest but thriving digital consultancy from their home in the peaceful Travis Heights neighborhood of Austin. He wasn't rich, not in the flashy way, but he had built a quiet life of stability, trust, and routine. The kind of man who grilled on Sundays, fixed neighbors' Wi-Fi issues for free, and still texted his wife, "Good morning, beautiful," even after 10 years of marriage. Rachel, on the other hand, was pure sunlight in human form. At least that's what everyone believed. At 34, she was warm, charming, always the first to offer help at the local community center. She had a degree in occupational therapy from the University of Texas and worked part-time at a pediatric clinic downtown. Kids loved her, parents adored her. No one ever saw her raise her voice or even her eyebrows. But beneath the sunflower dresses and kind smiles, something much darker was beginning to stir. Their home was a cozy 2-story craftsman near Blun Creek. Blue shutters, wraparound porch, and a kitchen where they had once slow-danced barefoot at midnight. But lately that kitchen had grown colder, the silence heavier. Dan started to notice the little things. Forgotten receipts from a hardware store he never visited. Rachel's phone, which used to be left face up on the counter, now constantly glued to her side, or turned face down. Her hugs lingered less. Her eyes, once soft, now flickered with something unreadable. One evening, while transferring files on the home office computer, Dan accidentally opened a backup folder from Rachel's phone. It wasn't the contents that shocked him. It was the fact that the folder was password protected. Rachel never locked anything from him. When he asked her about it casually over dinner, she laughed it off. "Oh, that's just my therapy notes. Hypa stuff, you know." But the way her hands shook while she poured the wine told a different story. And then came the whisper from a friend. Melissa, Rachel's colleague from the clinic, had bumped into Dan at HEB one weekend. She hesitated before leaning in, whispering, "Has Rachel been okay lately? I've seen her with this guy. Thought it was her cousin at first, but then, I don't know." Dan laughed. A nervous, dismissive laugh. Cousin? Rachel didn't have any cousins in Texas. That night, he couldn't sleep. The shadows on the bedroom ceiling looked different, longer, like knives. One morning, Rachel left early for a weekend seminar in Dallas, but she forgot to take her second phone. Dan didn't even know she had a second phone. That was the moment everything began to unravel. Every love story has a turning point. This was his. What would you do if the person you trusted most started turning into a stranger? Would you confront them? Or wait and watch? Comment ben doy nay. Because for Dan, watching wasn't enough. He was about to uncover a truth so cruel, so surgical in its deceit, it would change everything. And from that moment forward, he stopped being her husband and started becoming her hunter. Dan didn't touch the second phone right away. He stared at it for hours, resting silently on the counter like a loaded gun. Everything in him wanted to believe this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe it really was for clinic use, or maybe it was old, forgotten. But curiosity, or perhaps survival instinct, finally took over. He powered it on. No passcode. That was her mistake. The phone opened to a thread of texts with someone named Jay. At first glance, nothing unusual, but then he scrolled back a few weeks and one message hit him like a punch to the chest. "If everything goes right, he'll never wake up. I already started microdosing his wine." His heart stopped. He blinked, read it again, then again. The date matched the night he'd collapsed momentarily in the bathroom, nausea, dizziness he'd chalked up to overwork. That wasn't stress. That was real. The next messages were worse. Diagrams, chemical references, a link to a black market supplier site, and this. "I'll file the claim the week after. They'll never suspect. It's just Dan." Just Dan. He stumbled backward from the counter, gripping the edge to steady himself. Just Dan, the man who paid off her student loans, who stayed up through her panic attacks, who built her dream home office with his own hands. His vision swam, not from poison this time, but rage. He copied every file to a hidden folder on his desktop, encrypted it with a randomly generated password, and sent a backup to an anonymous email. Then he sat, for hours, silent, numb, trying to decide whether to call the police or burn the entire world she built. That night, he didn't sleep. He watched her breathe next to him. Calm, peaceful. The same mouth that whispered sweet nothings had sent digital death sentences behind his back. Over the next few days, Dan quietly began gathering evidence. He installed a discreet keylogger on their shared laptop. He reactivated an old Nest cam tucked above the bookshelf in the study. He even bought a portable audio recorder from a survivalist store outside Round Rock, paid cash, no trail. And Rachel? She kept smiling, kept leaving for appointments that didn't exist on any clinic schedule, kept mixing his drinks when he wasn't looking, kept calling him babe like nothing was wrong. But the cracks were showing. He saw her startle when he came home early, the rushed phone hang-ups, the sudden urgency to do his laundry every time he came back sweaty from the gym, like she was checking for something, wiping something away. Then one morning, the biggest confirmation yet. Dan brought the second phone to his friend, an ex-cop named Theo, who now worked cyber forensics freelance. Theo didn't need long. He traced the number of Jay, his name, Jared Michaels, age 41, unemployed, former bartender, and, coincidentally or not, Rachel's old flame from college, still living in Austin, still bitter if his social posts were any indication. The two of them had been meeting in motels on the East Side every other Thursday, The seminars in Dallas had never existed. Worse yet, there was a life insurance policy taken out in Dan's name less than a year ago, signed by Rachel. Beneficiary? Rachel Carter? Value? $700,000? Cause of payout? Accidental death. Taken out through a lesser-known agency, shady but still legal. Dan's entire reality crumbled that day. 10 years of shared laughter, anniversaries, holidays, reduced to a ledger sheet and an escape plan. But instead of confronting her, Dan made a choice. He would not go quietly. He would not just survive. He would expose her, publicly, brutally, on his terms. That night, as Rachel slept, Dan stared at her hand curled beside him. No weapon in the world is more dangerous than someone you once trusted completely. If you discovered your spouse was plotting your death, would you run, or would you let them walk into their own trap? Because Dan had made his decision. He wasn't going to the police. He was going to let her think she'd won, until the moment she realized she had played herself. Dan knew he couldn't rush this. One wrong step, one careless confrontation, and she'd vanish, with the money, the story, and maybe even his life. So he did what any betrayed husband-turned-strategist would do. He played the long game. Quietly. Precisely. The first move was surveillance. He replaced the smoke detector in their bedroom with a pinhole camera ordered discreetly from an overseas site. It arrived in an unmarked box, and he installed it in under 10 minutes while Rachel was at her massage therapy appointment. Every night, while pretending to snore, he recorded their conversations. At first, nothing incriminating, just casual murmurs, updates from her day, a few distracted kisses. But then, 2 weeks in, she slipped. Her phone buzzed. A message preview flashed across the screen. He's still breathing? Thought we were past that point. Rachel didn't know Dan had cloned her SIM card using a $49 kit from a gray market site. Every incoming message hit his burner device too. And that one made his blood go cold. He saved everything, screenshotted every text, archived every video file, backed up to an encrypted USB drive he kept hidden in the hollowed-out back of a wall clock in the guest bathroom, one Rachel never used. And then he started poking holes, gently, casually. "Hey, didn't you say you were in Round Rock last Friday? I thought I saw your car parked downtown." Rachel's laugh was just a beat too quick. "Nope. Must have been someone else with good taste in cars." Lies, all of it. But Dan didn't push. He let her lie. He hired a private investigator named Marla, a retired DEA analyst with a sixth sense for deception. Marla followed Rachel discreetly, documenting her meetups with Jared, photographing their motel entrances, and even recording a conversation they had in the back parking lot of a Dollar Tree. "In it," Rachel whispered. "He's getting suspicious. I may have to speed this up." Dan watched that clip 10 times. She wanted him dead. That part was no longer speculation. But what she didn't know was that every move she made was now being logged, traced, and fed into a digital vault labeled Rachel Carter's downfall. Dan began preparing the final act. He reached out to Theo again. This time, to set up a secure live stream system, triggered by motion, designed to broadcast instantly to a private YouTube link. The moment Rachel made her final move, the world would see everything. No edits, no denials. To test her resolve, Dan pretended to get sick. He began skipping meals, faking dizzy spells. Rachel took the bait. She started insisting on pouring his drinks, cooking every dinner. Her behavior turned oddly affectionate. The predator, now preparing to feast. But karma doesn't rush. It watches. It waits. Karma doesn't rush, but it never misses. And then came the ultimate clue. While combing through Rachel's financial records, using software he'd built himself, Dan found an anomaly, A wire transfer. $10,000 sent to a shell company in Tulsa under the name NovaMed Consulting. But NovaMed didn't exist. Not legally. Not in any registry. It was a front, possibly for someone who could make things disappear. He was running out of time. Rachel wasn't just planning, she was accelerating. Still, he stayed the course. He bought a decoy pill bottle filled with activated charcoal tablets, disguised in a prescription bottle labeled Sleep Aid. He left it next to his nightstand, exactly where she could see it. That night, she switched it. He heard the faint click of the bottle cap, and he smiled. She had taken the bait. But something was gnawing at Dan. A feeling, a whisper that perhaps Rachel wasn't working alone. Not just Jared, but maybe someone closer. Someone inside his circle. The hints were there. Encrypted emails he never sent. Security logs showing deleted footage. Strange calls at odd hours that stopped ringing when he answered. She's not the only one playing me, he thought. There was another hand moving pieces behind the curtain. A twist was coming. He could feel it. But Dan was ready, because in his world now, every smile was a mask, every kiss, a transaction, and every lie, a rope she was using to hang herself. Stay tuned. The moment of truth was almost here. March 12th, 9 a.m. The Travis County Courthouse in downtown Austin buzzed with the low hum of early morning foot traffic. But inside courtroom 3B, silence hung heavy. Dan Carter stood alone at the plaintiff's table, clad in a charcoal gray suit that made his frame seem more steel than flesh, calm, measured, prepared. Rachel entered moments later, hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, white blouse crisp, every inch of her rehearsed and radiant. She didn't look at Dan, not once. But her attorney, a slick man named Harold Leeds, smirked as if this was just another messy domestic spat that would end in mediation and alimony. They thought they still held the narrative. What they didn't know was that Dan had detonated a bomb before ever stepping into that courtroom. Earlier that morning, using the pre-scheduled live stream Theo helped him build, Dan published a 32-minute video titled, "The Wife Who Tried to Kill Me, A Digital Confession." In it, every piece of evidence played in chronological order: text messages, motel footage, audio recordings, the attempted pill switch, even Rachel's whispered plan in the parking lot. The final frame, her smiling, gently stirring a glass of wine, captioned, "He won't taste a thing." Within 2 hours, the video had hit 400,000 views. Rachel Carter trended on X, formerly Twitter. News outlets began circling the courthouse before the bailiff called the room to order. Judge Hamilton, a veteran of family court, peered over his glasses as if already sensing this case was far from ordinary. Dan opened calmly. No theatrics, just facts. He submitted video logs, timestamps, geolocation data, showed the life insurance policy Rachel signed, presented financial forensics tying her to NovaMed and its shell transfers, played the audio where Rachel explicitly said, "He's getting suspicious. I may have to speed this up." Rachel's face didn't move, but her attorneys did. Harold Leeds stood, objected, accused Dan of fabricating digital evidence. "Deepfakes, Your Honor. This is sensationalism, not proof." Marla, the retired DEA investigator, took the stand. "I tailed Mrs. Carter for 4 months," she stated calmly. "Every video submitted here today, I recorded, unedited, stored on encrypted drives with chain-of-custody logs, time-stamped, GPS verified." A hush fell over the room. Even Judge Hamilton leaned forward. Leeds tried again. "But motive is speculation. Maybe they were arguing. Maybe—" Dan raised a finger. "One more thing, Your Honor." He opened his laptop, projected the audio file Rachel had unknowingly triggered 3 nights before, the final recording from the Nest Cam above their bed. "Tomorrow's the night," Rachel whispered. "I crushed it into powder, just enough to mimic a stroke. No one will question it." As her voice echoed through the room, Rachel's mask cracked. One tear slid down her cheek. Her lip quivered. But it was already too late. From the back of the courtroom, a man stood up. Short-cropped hair, nervous eyes. Jared Michaels. I need to say something," he stammered. Rachel's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. "Jared, no!" But the judge motioned. "Let him speak." Jared approached the bench, trembling. "She told me we'd run away, that he'd drunk himself to death. I thought she just needed out of a bad marriage." He paused. "I didn't know she actually wanted him dead. I didn't know about the pills." Dan's fists clenched, not in anger, but in closure. It was done. The courtroom remained breathless as Judge Hamilton cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, based on the evidence submitted, you are hereby remanded to custody pending charges of attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." As officers moved to cuff her, Rachel finally turned to Dan, eyes wild. Betrayed. Like he had done this to her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because in that moment she realized something far worse than death had happened. He had let her believe she was in control, and now the entire world knew who she really was. The gallery gasped. News anchors outside began reporting live, and Dan finally exhaled. For the first time in 6 months. Do you think justice was served? Let me know in the comments, because what happened next would echo far beyond that courtroom. Rachel Carter was sentenced to 18 years in prison for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. The judge, in his closing remarks, stated plainly, "There are betrayals, and then there are crimes so intimate they shake the foundation of trust itself." She lost her medical license. Her assets were frozen. Her name became a cautionary headline. The viral video Dan posted, "The wife who tried to kill me," crossed 5 million views within a week. Interviews followed, podcasts, a documentary deal. But Dan didn't seek fame. He didn't want revenge served cold and commercialized. What he wanted was peace. 3 months after the verdict, Dan moved back to Flagstaff, back to the pine trees and dry mountain air of his childhood. He bought a small house near Buffalo Park, adopted a golden retriever he named Charlie, and began teaching cybersecurity workshops at the local library. Quiet. Simple. Honest. People in town still whispered sometimes. They recognized his face, his story, but no one asked. They just smiled kindly, as if acknowledging that some storms, once weathered, deserve nothing but silence and sun. He still keeps the USB drive, locked in a safe, not because he wants to relive it, but because it reminds him what unchecked trust can cost, and what clarity can save. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address, just one line inside. "You were never supposed to outlive me. R." Dan didn't react. He burned it. Slowly. Piece by piece. Because the woman who once called herself his wife no longer had power over him. Her chapter had ended. His was just beginning. He tells his story not for sympathy, but as a warning. "If love feels like poison," he once said during a podcast, "check who's pouring your glass." And perhaps most haunting of all, he still believes Rachel loved him, in her own twisted way. But love without boundaries, without conscience, that's not love. That's war. And in this war, Dan survived. Not by fighting harder, but by listening quietly, thinking strategically, and letting karma do what karma does best. The seeds you sow today will bloom tomorrow, whether you like it or not. And that's how karma struck, proving no one escapes justice. If you find this story thought-provoking, please press like and subscribe to support the channel. Share the video so everyone can know that justice always prevails. Comment below if you've ever witnessed a similar story, or if you yourself have been betrayed by the person you trusted most. See you in the next story, where justice doesn't knock on the door but smashes it open with the truth.